Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It's strange how one moment can change everything you thought you knew about yourself, your marriage, and your choices. That's exactly what happened to me on an ordinary evening that turned into something I never expected. My story begins in a way that might sound familiar to some: routine days, a stable marriage, the comfort of knowing your partner is right there with you. But comfort can sometimes lead to something else, to restlessness, to temptation, and to secrets you never thought you'd keep. I had been married for years, and to the outside world, it looked like we had everything together: a home, stability, and love that seemed unshakable. But what people don't see are the quiet spaces in between. The silences at the dinner table. The way your partner's eyes don't linger on you the way they used to. The empty conversations that sound more like chores than love. And when those silences stretch long enough, someone else's voice, someone else's touch, can start to feel louder than anything else in the world. That's where he came in. He wasn't supposed to matter. He wasn't supposed to be anything more than a passing distraction. But the truth is, he became the spark I didn't realize I was craving. He looked at me like I was more than just a wife or a role to fill. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, like my heart was racing just to be seen again. It wasn't just about romance or attraction, it was about being wanted, being noticed. Every stolen glance, every accidental brush of his hand against mine, pulled me deeper into something I swore I would never let happen. I told myself I was strong enough to walk away, that I was loyal, that I was in control. But control is fragile, and temptation has a way of breaking down every wall you thought you built. Before I knew it, I was standing on the edge of a choice I couldn't undo. That night, everything crossed a line. The world outside seemed to fade away, and I was left with only the sound of my heartbeat and the weight of what I was doing. The air was thick with guilt and desire, my mind torn between love and betrayal, between who I thought I was and who I had become. And just when the room seemed to close in around me, I heard it, my husband's voice calling my name. In that instant, time froze. My heart stopped. My body went cold. How much had he seen? What did he know? Could I hide it? Could I explain it? Or was everything I had built, my marriage, my home, my entire life, about to collapse in that single moment? The sound of my husband's voice calling my name that night still lingers in my memory, almost like an echo I can't shake off. It was the moment where every choice I had made suddenly felt dangerous, almost like I was walking on a tightrope between two very different lives. My heart raced, not just from the fear of being caught, but from the confusion of realizing how far I had already gone. In that silence, I felt like two versions of myself were staring at each other, the faithful wife I had promised to be, and the woman who had let her heart wander. But before I tell you what happened in that instant, I think it's important to go back, to share how I even ended up here. Because the truth is, nothing like this happens overnight. It's a slow shift, a gradual drift away from the life you thought you wanted, until suddenly you don't recognize yourself anymore. My husband and I met in college. He was charming, smart, the kind of man who made everyone laugh. We built our life on a foundation of friendship and loyalty. For years, I believed we had the kind of marriage people envied. We traveled, we hosted family dinners, we supported each other's dreams. But over time, the rhythm of our life grew quieter. His career demanded long hours, and I often found myself alone at home. The small things, the conversations, the little gestures of affection started to fade. We still loved each other, but it felt more like a partnership than a romance. That's when I met him. He wasn't supposed to mean anything. At first, it was simple: a neighbor, a familiar face in the neighborhood, someone I'd run into during errands or at community gatherings. He had an ease about him, a warmth in his smile that felt disarming. And he noticed me in ways I hadn't felt noticed in years. A compliment here, a thoughtful question there. It didn't feel dangerous then, only flattering. But words have power. The more he spoke to me, the more I found myself waiting for those moments. A text that brightened my day. A glance that lingered longer than it should have. It wasn't about crossing lines, not at first. It was about filling a space in my heart I hadn't even realized was empty. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing, just a passing feeling. But the more I pushed it away, the stronger it grew. He had a way of making me feel like the center of the room, even when we were surrounded by people. He laughed at my jokes, he asked about my thoughts, and when his hand brushed mine one afternoon, it was like the air itself shifted. I remember pulling away quickly, but the electricity of that moment stayed with me long after. And that was the beginning of my undoing. What started as harmless attention became something harder to resist. I found myself thinking about him late at night, wondering what it would be like to be truly seen again. Wondering if it was wrong to crave that kind of connection, or if it was simply human. All of this led me to that night, the night when everything collided. My husband's voice calling my name reminded me of the life I had chosen, the vows I had spoken. But the other part of me, the part that had been awakened, couldn't silence the longing that had already taken root. The moment my husband called my name that night felt like a storm crashing into my chest. I froze, caught between two worlds that could never exist together. His voice carried through the hallway calm, casual even, like he had no idea of the war happening inside me. It was the strangest mix of relief and terror. Relief, because maybe he hadn't seen anything yet. Terror, because I knew how fragile the truth was, how one wrong glance, one misstep, could unravel everything I had built with him. The days after that moment felt heavier than usual. My husband carried on with his routine work, phone calls, late nights spent at his desk. But for me, the air between us had shifted. Every time he looked at me, I wondered if he suspected something. Every time he touched my hand, I felt the guilt burn through me, reminding me of the line I had already crossed in my heart. But at the same time, every time I saw the other man, that guilt fought against something else, desire, connection, a dangerous kind of pull I couldn't explain away. The conflict wasn't just between me and my husband, or me and this other man. It was inside me, a constant tug-of-war between loyalty and temptation, between the comfort of what I knew and the thrill of what I wasn't supposed to want. I kept telling myself I could still stop, that it wasn't too late. But then there would be a glance across the room, a conversation that lingered longer than it should, and suddenly stopping felt impossible. I started noticing the smallest things about him. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me. The way his eyes seemed to search mine, as if he already knew what I was too afraid to admit. We never talked openly about what was happening between us, but the silence said more than words ever could. And that silence was the most dangerous part. Meanwhile, at home, my husband was growing more distant without even realizing it. His work consumed him, and our conversations stayed on the surface: dinners, bills, schedules. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was imagining the distance, that maybe I was the one pulling away, but the truth is, both of us had stopped reaching for each other long ago. And that left enough space for someone else to step in. There was also the constant fear of what people would say if they ever knew. Our friends, our families, they saw us as a stable couple, the kind who had it all together. But behind closed doors, cracks were forming. And if anyone ever found out the truth, everything we had built, the trust, the respect, the reputation, would shatter instantly. One afternoon, I found myself replaying my husband's voice in my head, the way he called my name that night. Did he sense something? Was it just coincidence? Or was it the beginning of him realizing what was happening right under his roof? I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he knew more than he let on. And so, I was stuck in this endless loop, torn between the man who promised me forever and the man who made me feel alive in the present. Both paths felt dangerous. Both carried risks I wasn't sure I was strong enough to face. Yet the pull of temptation kept growing stronger, as if fate was pushing me toward a choice I didn't want to make. The days that followed felt like walking across a bridge that could collapse at any second. Every interaction with my husband felt heavier, like the air between us was holding secrets too big to stay hidden. At night, When he called my name in that familiar way, I would lie awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he could feel the distance I was carrying in my heart. I wondered if he could sense the guilt in my silence, or if he was too buried in his own world to notice the cracks forming right in front of him. And then there was the other side of me, the side that kept drifting toward the man who wasn't supposed to matter. The more I tried to keep him at arm's length, the more fate seemed determined to push us together. A run-in at the grocery store, a chance encounter in the parking lot, a conversation that stretched far too long into the night. Each time I told myself I would stop. But each time, the pull grew stronger until it felt impossible to break free. The conflict between what I wanted and what I had promised was eating me alive. My marriage was supposed to be safe, steady, the kind of love people prayed for. But safety doesn't always feel like passion. And passion doesn't always feel safe. That was the battle raging inside me, one I couldn't talk to anyone about, not even my closest friends. If they knew, they would see me differently. Maybe even hate me. So I carried it alone, every choice weighing heavier on my shoulders. The turning point came one evening when my husband surprised me with something he hadn't done in a long time, a quiet dinner at home, just the two of us. He lit candles, he smiled in that old way that used to make me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. For a moment, I almost believed we could go back to what we once were. But even as he laughed and held my hand across the table, my mind betrayed me, drifting to the thought of the other man, of the fire I couldn't seem to put out. That night, I realized I couldn't keep walking this line forever. Something was going to break. Either my husband would discover the truth, or I would have to face the choice I'd been running from. The suspense of not knowing when or how it would all come crashing down was unbearable, and yet I knew the moment was coming. The night of the storm was supposed to be like any other. The sound of rain against the windows filled the silence at home, and I sat across from my husband, trying to act as though everything was fine. But the truth was pressing in on me like the thunder outside, loud, impossible to ignore, waiting to break. I thought the tension had reached its peak, that my secret was the only thing threatening to shatter the life we had built. I was wrong. The twist came when my husband leaned back in his chair, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, and said quietly, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." My heart froze. For weeks, I had been terrified of him discovering the truth about me, about the feelings I had tried to bury. But his tone wasn't sharp, wasn't accusatory. It was heavy, almost tired, like he was carrying his own secret. I forced a smile and asked what he meant, though my hands trembled beneath the table. That's when he admitted it. He had noticed the distance between us too. The late nights, the silences, the lack of warmth that used to come so easily. He confessed he had wondered if I still loved him the way I once did. His words cut through me, because in that moment, I realized he wasn't blind to my detachment after all. He had been living in his own quiet fear, worried he was losing me without understanding why. But what he said next was the real twist. My husband told me that during those months I felt most alone, he had been confiding in someone else too. A coworker. A woman who listened when he spoke, who asked about his day when I barely looked up from mine. He insisted nothing had happened, nothing physical, but the emotional intimacy he described was undeniable. And suddenly, I was staring at a reflection of my own betrayal, only from the other side. The room seemed to spin. I had spent so much energy guarding my secret, drowning in guilt and longing, never realizing that he had been walking the same dangerous line. It wasn't just me who had drifted. It was us, both of us searching for pieces of ourselves in other people. The realization made everything more complicated. Did this mean we were even? Or did it mean we were both too far gone to ever return to what we once had? The storm outside grew louder, and so did the one inside me. Part of me felt a strange relief, knowing I wasn't the only one holding secrets. But another part burned with questions. Who was she? How much had she given him that I no longer did? And why did it hurt so much to hear him describe the very same connection I had been chasing somewhere else? The tension between us was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to confess everything, to demand answers, but instead, I sat there frozen, my mind spinning with the weight of two truths that couldn't coexist. My husband had unknowingly mirrored my betrayal, and now the fragile ground we stood on was cracking faster than ever. This revelation raised the stakes higher than I ever imagined. It wasn't just about my secret anymore, it was about his too. And the question now wasn't only whether I would lose him if he discovered the truth, but whether we had already lost each other long before that night. The storm outside had finally settled into a soft drizzle, but inside our home, the air was thick and heavy. My husband's confession about the other woman still echoed in my mind, and for the first time, I couldn't hide behind silence anymore. I looked at him across the table, his face worn from honesty, and I felt the weight of my own secret pressing harder than ever. It was the moment I had been running from, the moment where everything had to come out, no matter the cost. With my voice shaking, I told him the truth. I admitted I had drifted too, that I had found myself caught in the attention of another man. I didn't give details, but the admission alone changed everything. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and for a long moment, he said nothing. It was like the world had stopped spinning, and the silence between us was louder than the thunder had ever been. When he finally spoke, his words weren't filled with anger the way I expected. Instead, they were low, steady, and full of hurt. He said he wasn't surprised. That he had felt it all along, the distance, the way my mind seemed somewhere else. He admitted he had been waiting for this truth, dreading it but knowing it was there. Hearing him say it broke something inside me, because I realized how much we had both been pretending, how much of our marriage had been held together by habit instead of love. The climax wasn't a fight, it was a raw unraveling. We sat in that room, two people who had promised forever, confessing how far we had already wandered. Tears fell, words stumbled, but beneath all of it was the question neither of us could answer. Was there still something worth saving? Then came the final twist. Just when I thought the night couldn't hold any more surprises, my husband revealed the woman he had been confiding in was someone I knew. A friend. Someone who had been to our home, who had smiled at me across dinner tables, who had asked about my life as if she cared. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, because betrayal doesn't just come from within, it comes from the people you least expect. The storm had passed, but we were left standing in ruins, holding pieces of trust too broken to fit back together. And yet, in that strange and painful honesty, something shifted. We both saw the truth for what it was. We had lost each other long before temptation ever knocked on our doors. The silence that followed my husband's final revelation was unlike anything I had ever felt. Knowing the woman he had turned to as someone I had once called a friend only deepened the wound. It made the betrayal sharper, more personal. But in that silence, something unexpected happened. We stopped pretending. For the first time in years, every mask was gone. We weren't husband and wife putting on a show for the world. We were just two people, flawed, broken, and facing the truth we had both tried so hard to avoid. In the days that followed, our home felt like a battlefield, not of shouting or blame, but of heavy questions. Could we forgive each other? Could we rebuild trust when both of us had already stepped outside its boundaries? The simple answer was no, not the way things had been before. But the harder, more complicated answer was that maybe, just maybe, honesty had opened a door we didn't realize was locked. We chose to face it together. Not with promises of going back, because we both knew the past was gone, but with a cautious willingness to see if we could start fresh. It wasn't easy. There were nights filled with tears, days filled with doubt. But there were also moments of surprising tenderness, like rediscovering each other as strangers instead of holding onto the weight of who we once were. As for the other man, I walked away. I knew I had to. Whatever spark I felt with him couldn't survive the damage it had caused inside me. It wasn't love, it was escape. And the cost of escape had nearly been my entire life. Letting go wasn't just about loyalty to my husband. It was about loyalty to myself, about choosing a path where I could heal instead of running further into something that only deepened the wound. The same went for my husband. He cut ties with the woman he had been confiding in. It hurt him too, admitting how far he had leaned on someone else. But like me, he realized that sometimes temptation isn't about love, it's about what's missing at home. And if we wanted to survive, we had to start filling those empty spaces with each other again. The ending wasn't a fairy tale, and maybe that's why it felt real. We didn't walk away hand in hand with everything magically fixed. But we walked away willing to try, willing to rebuild, and willing to face the truth that relationships aren't defined by perfection. They're defined by what you do after the mistakes are revealed. So, what do you think? If two people betray each other, can they still build something new from the ashes? Would you forgive, or would you walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you'd like a sequel to this story. Your perspective might just help someone else facing the same crossroads. Summary: this is a story of love, temptation, and the fragile lines between loyalty and betrayal. A woman finds herself caught between her marriage and a dangerous spark with another man, only to discover her husband has secrets of his own. What begins as silence and hidden feelings unravels into painful honesty, a shocking twist, and an ending that challenges what love and forgiveness really mean.